Nigeria's election year has come and gone, but will remain a watershed in the country's political history. The presidential election will be remembered as perhaps the most keenly contested in the country's recent history. Considering the vote difference among the top three parties, the All Progressives Congress APC, the People's Democratic Party PDP, and the Labour Party LP. The All Progressives Congress retained power at the centre, with the emergence of Senator Bola Tinubu as winner of the presidential election. But his victory was challenged majorly by the PDP and the Labour Party, all the way to the Supreme Court, which affirmed the election of Bola Tinubu.
To avert any form of confusion,
The Independent National Electoral Commission was largely criticized for the failure of the IRF portal, specifically for the presidential election. Chairman of the Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, admitted that the Commission experienced glitches in transmitting results through the IRF during the presidential election.
While voter accreditation using the bimodal voter accreditation system was very successful, the uploading of results to the INEC result viewing portal, the IREV, especially for the presidential election, encountered a glitch as explained in our statement on the 26th of February 2023.
The European Union Election Observation Mission in June released a report which described the elections as ensuring real-time publication and access to election results as a product of a poorly done desk job that relied heavily on few persons and attempting to ridicule the Nigerian electoral system and the electoral umpire. Following the governorship elections, attentions have also turned to the courts. Just like the presidential election, the Court of Appeal has sacked Governors Caleb Mutfwang of Plateau State and Abba Yusuf of Kano State, while declaring the Zamfara state election inconclusive and ordering INEC to hold new elections in 2 local governments. The Court of Appeal sitting in Abuja also reserved judgment on the appeal by Governor Abdullahi Sule after a tribunal ruling nullified his re-election. Meanwhile, Nigerian politics experienced a new twist as the Labour Party, with its new leader Mr. Peter Obi, who was also the presidential candidate of the party, pulled some surprises across the country, winning the governorship election in Abia State and unseating many lawmakers at the federal and state levels. This was also partly responsible for the large turnover of lawmakers at the National Assembly. That is almost 70% of new senators and members of the House of Representatives. The build-up to the National Assembly leadership elections was rather interesting. It appeared as though a repeat of 2015 would happen when some members of the ruling party insisted on contesting for leadership positions, despite the stance already taken by the party to field Senators Godswill Akpabio and Jibrin Barau for Senate President and Deputy, and Honourables Abbas Tajuddin and Benjamin Kalu as Speaker and Deputy. All 4 candidates eventually emerged victorious on Election Day.
Of various jurisdictions.
The judiciary also found itself in the eyes of the storm, especially from the statement from retired Justice Mohammed Datijo, which further prompted calls for justice reforms.
The judiciary must be uniquely above board. Appointments should not be polluted by political, selfish, and sectional interests. The place of merit, it must be urged, cannot be overemphasized.
If we keep the trajectory that we're on right now, there will be a citizens' revolt against the judiciary. And when that happens, it would have to be a radical sweep. But we can't keep on the way we are going, where citizens are losing confidence in the judiciary. In those days, if someone offended you, you would say, I'll go to court. These days, if somebody offends you, he says to you, go to court. And you know what that means? It means that he doesn't think that the courts would give you justice.
Rivers State is currently experiencing a political crisis, which many fear could spiral out of control if not properly managed. Governor Simlayem Fubara is at loggerheads with former governor and FCT minister Nyesom Wike. The crisis has led to the burning and eventual demolition of the State Assembly buildings, series of protests, and defection of 26 state lawmakers to the APC from the PDP. President Bola Tinubu had to intervene in the rift between both men. The president also interceded in the political crisis in Ondo State, prompting the transfer of power to the deputy governor, after Governor Rotimi Akeredolu had been unable to perform his duties as governor for several months due to an undisclosed illness. President Bola Tinubu's bloated cabinet was not overlooked, as many criticized his decision to increase the number of ministers to a record 48, despite the country's economic woes and calls for a cut in the cost of governance. The presidency also came under heavy criticism for attending the COP28 in Dubai with 1,411 delegates, even though the government had explained that it only sponsored 422 of the number. To wrap up the election year, the Independent National Electoral Commission on the 11th of November successfully conducted off-cycle elections in Kogi, Imo and Bayelsa states, and is gearing up for the Edo and Ondo elections in 2024. This was a litmus test for the Commission to see what improvements will be made to the general elections.
It is possible, it's important to amend the Electoral Act on one hand to make sure that procurement is taken away from INEC, so that they can focus on technical job. We'll have minting and printing, or we put it in the hands of sort of an independent committee that can look at it. And this is important because as long as there is struggle to manage the billions of funds being allocated to INEC in terms of printing, beaver procuring, beavers printing, ballot papers and what have you, we will continue to have this sort of issues. If next year off-cycle election is going to work, INEC has to start confidence building that is practical and pragmatic from this year, so that the voter register there, we have to get it right and clean it up, ensure that people are able to get their voters card on time.
Nigerians look towards an improved electoral system in 2024 as the National Assembly commences amendments to the Electoral Act, even though there are concerns about the credibility of the Electoral Commission following the appointment and confirmation of some resident electoral commissioners affiliated to political parties. Victoria Longchan for Channels Television News.
Indeed, 2023, the year that's about to go in a few hours, has been one of those years that's been turbulent, especially in the political space. We saw the emergence of new governments at both the state and federal level. But what's the plan? What's going forward in 2024? Vis-a-vis across the country, Rivers State, Ondo State, and all the other states. Yes, some states are going to have elections this year. That's 2024, Edo, and I think Ondo State also. But let's look at this. We have here in the Abuja studio, we have Professor Judicial Adibe, who's a professor of political science at the Nasarawa State University. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And joining us virtually is Senator Enyinaya Abaribe, who's representing the All Progressives Grand Alliance, Abia South. He joins us virtually. Senator, thank you for joining us. All right, I'm sure that we'll get him on real soon. Let's start out with you, Professor Adibe. 2024 is around the corner. 2023 is done and dusted almost.
Almost.
But this year saw a keenly contested election, bringing in a new government and a new, some would say, the birth of a new political system. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by the...
No, not me. Some will say, this is the first time Nigeria has a thoroughbred politician as president.
Well, again, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by, because he's an accountant, at least as far as we know, and a businessman. A title is a title. You're right. It was keenly contested. It also shows a number of, shortcomings in the system, and that we still have a long way to go in our journey to nationhood. And we've seen also what I call the politicians coming in various forms of messianic packaging. And almost 8 months after, we're also having to ask ourselves, so what? It's one thing to, people were already complaining about the Buhari government and the hardship that, people believed, we had been experienced, the nepotism, the, nativism, and we are looking forward to something better. Then we have to sit back later and isolate a number of metrics, take each metric at a time and say, on this metric, is this government better than what we had? In terms of
some argue that it might be too soon, just, almost 8 months. Isn't that too soon?
Are you trying to tell me that 8 months is not sufficiently long for you to be able to decipher a direction on some fronts? I mean, people can make that argument. I'm not saying, after all, people start to judge government after 100 days. By 100 days in office, the whole essence is that it's giving you enough time for you to lay down a path on which you're going. So if we keep up making excuses, the politicians, the way they work, by the second year, they are preparing for second term. Or, in fact, already the journey for 2027 has started. So we can't keep making excuses for them. That's exactly what people did for Buhari. Even the people that call themselves the Buharists, they kept telling you it was, when people complained it was taking too long to constitute a cabinet. You say, wait, be patient. After 1 year, it was just up to the 7th year that even the ardent supporters started to sing a different song. By then it's late. So I think it will behoove on all of us to keep the government on its toes, interrogate every policy. That's the only way we can bring out the best in them. And we take it one at a time. For example, the signature policy that's removing subsidy, my personal opinion is that he spent these 8 months trying to manage the consequences of not having thought through that. And you can see that virtually every other thing that has been done, 90% of every other thing, has been more like looking for headlines or managing the after effects.
Professor Adibe, this decision of removing subsidy is one that has stayed in the polity for so long, and many will say there was none that had the political will to do it. So President Tinubu came in and he thought the best thing to do was, even though it had been said before him by the previous administration that he's going to go at a certain time, but he came in and used those words, he's gone. Well, some will say that is being decisive as a president.
Well, that is there's also one thing, there's a difference between being decisive. You have to be decisive, and then you must have put in a number of policy measures. You had 3 months from the time you were elected. So all those times you isolated yourself in France and others, there should be policy measures. For example, then all we saw was, you bring an education policy, we interrogate it and found out that it wasn't implementable. Where is the conditional cash transfer? You found out it was not properly thought through. Let me consider many governments do start on a wobbly start. But what I'm saying that it's part of our responsibilities, and not your responsibility as a media person, that we should interrogate them, hold them, say, look, this, what's happening? So that if you don't do that, we become part of the, if it fails, we become part of the failure.
Let's bring in Senator Aina Baribe of Abia South, APGA. Thank you for joining us, Senator. Okay, again, we hope that we can get him to join the conversation real soon, but we'd like to say here that we did invite the spokesperson to the president, Ajirin Galali, but he pulled out at the last minute. Hopefully we'll get him to join sometime.
I believe we can see
Senator Baribe, if you can hear us, we're looking at the year 2023. Yes, it's come and gone, and come and going.
Ticking.
But 2024 is around the corner, and Professor Adibe has just talked about the fact that it looks as if the political space, yes, keenly contested elections, but it looks as if the lessons have not been learned. And it looks as if there are still a lot of things to do even as we go into the year 2024. Do you agree with him?
Technology, okay. It happens.
Technology.
I think we'll come back to him.
We'll come back to Senator.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Professor Adibe, and this is, back to what you talked about metrics. If there were some strengths that you've seen in the last, let's say, 7 months of this administration, what would you call that, and what do you expect, in 2024? Yes.
Well, one thing I see, I like the communication mode, because when you show metrics, it must be in comparison to what? In comparison to the previous administration. You can see the current Minister for Information and National Orientation is quite, he uses very fine language, and the same thing with presidential spokesperson. Contrast them with what you had under Buhari, with Lai Mohammed, with Femi Adesina, with Garuba Shehu. I can see that one of the reasons why the government had not gotten so many knocks is because of this subtle communication, what we call soft power approach, where they are not combative. Even when they disagree with you, say, okay, I can see the point you're making, but that's what the Mr. President thinks. So you come in with this, looking for a fight, and the person you're taking the fight to deflates your will to fight. And there's a Chinese general called Sun Tzu. He says that to defeat your enemy without a fight is the highest acme of skill, is the highest demonstration of skill. So that system of communication, PR, means that people to knock them are restrained, because people that will give them the fight, they don't have anybody to give them a fight. In contrast to Femi Adesina, who came around and started talking about wellers. Well, you called for a fight, they gave you a fight. And it was a brutal fight in such a way that you thought they were going to come and fight on your top. And the whole president was being called Jibril of Sudan, and some people even believed that. That was their own mode of fighting, and others fighting. So I think I'll give him credit. I'll give credit, although I am not happy that somebody like Abayo Onanuga, who proclaimed himself a Yoruba irredentist, who played a very, infamous role in the weaponization of ethnicity during the election, especially in Lagos. Other than that, I'll give them credit. I also feel that, the image of the vice, I'm not being disrespectful, the image of the First Lady and the Vice President were not really that spectacular before the election. But you can see that the way they've approached their work with compassion and all this, I think they are beginning to soften up. Even the President himself, his communication style, on the symbolic level, people thought, Baba Blue and all this, getting better in terms of speaking. Apart from those symbolic things, the real things still need to be done. It's very difficult for you to look at, for example, a potentially good policy, which is subsidizing transport. You come and announce it about 4 days to the Christmas, and then giving the impression that it's one of those things that you're looking for headlines and the decision taken on the feet. And then you look at the impact assessment, and they said 128 people benefited. That tells you something. And then again, when that was being announced, it was Alake, the Minister for Solid Minerals, while the Minister for Transport was there, and Minister for Information. You ask yourself, what was the subtext in Alake giving this, telling the people there? Is one of two things. Either to say, well, I am closer to the epicenter of power, or this policy originated from me. These are some of the optics that I believe the government should be also looking at. As you said, there are still potential signs. We are told that Dangote refinery is coming on stream. The Port Harcourt one is mechanically completed and all this. Hopefully, and the others coming on stream at the end of 2024. If all goes well, it is possible that there should be some moderate, what the experts are saying, not crashing of price, but some, some reduction in the price of fuel, which probably again will impact on the demand for foreign currency. That's a hope. So we see that as a potential,
What legacy would you say INEC, is leaving Nigerians, from this general elections and, off-cycle elections we had in 2023?
I think I've said this even from 2019. INEC cannot deliver anything now because it has legitimacy crisis. The first thing that should have been done is for Professor Mahmoud Yakubu to go. I mean, in climes where honor means anything, even if you feel that you've done your best, to the extent that international and local observers have condemned, heavily criticized the conduct of the election, the best thing you should do is to step aside. His life doesn't need to depend on it. You step aside for the sake of the integrity of that institution. And for as long as it remains, I don't think anybody will believe that they will get anything from INEC. And it was also a mistake on the part of the government when they said, I can understand why they said it, that INEC has conducted the best election. I think they were trying to say it in the context of trying to legitimize their declaration as president-elect. But the consequence is that it doesn't give you room to say we are going to embark on further electoral reform, because you said they did a perfect job.
But this is the first time we're using the Electoral Act of 2022 in the general election, based on the amendments that we've had.
Well, Prof, before you go into that, I think we have Senator Abaribe with us now. And Senator Abaribe, we do know that technology has kept you out of this conversation for a while, but if you can hear us, this matter of the elections of 2023, yes. What legacy are we looking at towards 2024? Seeing that this is the first time the Electoral Act of 2022 was used, and there are 2 more elections to go in 2024.
I don't know whether you can hear me very well now.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I think what is going to happen is that there must be, and we will just have to amend that Electoral Act and remove the human element from it. Because all that happened was simple. In the presidential elections, somebody switched off the presidential portal, and that completely spoiled everything about the presidential elections. In the subsequent gubernatorial elections, people literally seized the ballot papers and the beavers and the final result sheets and uploaded whatever they wanted on it, which means that that human element gap is what we need to clear.
Senator Abaribe,
that's all we have to do about
if I may come in here, you said something there that's quite significant. You said someone switched up the presidential portal. Do you have evidence of this? How did you know that?
INEC itself said they had a glitch. What glitch? On the same time, the same day, the same moment that the results for the senatorial and House of Rep results were also uploaded. There was no glitch on that one. So when somebody tells you that there was a glitch on the presidential portal, how could you believe such thing? They were just being very economical with the truth.
Well, you know, this matter of removing the human element in the...
Like I said, the human element, which means something happened there. It was done deliberately. If there was a glitch, it should have happened in the senatorial and the House of Rep elections, which was taking place at the same time. So when 2 things are happening at the same time and all that, if something looks like a dog, quacks like a dog, what do you call it? It's a dog.
Senator Baribe, if I may come in, and this is because we want to look towards 2024, because one would say that, the matter has been in courts, the Supreme Court has made the decision on it, and we've moved away from that presidential election. So there is the question of the Electoral Act now. And as a senator, do you think that it still needs tinkering? And this is to represent properly what you think are the aspirations of Nigerians when it comes to a proper, credible, free, fair general election?
My view is simple. It's not the act. It is the operators of the system that are the people. So it does not matter how much we tinker with it. So long as somebody is prepared to do the wrong thing, they will do it. And so it has to do with the orientation of the person. And that's why I said, if we can remove the human element, if we can now use technology, if we can now come to the point where I can use my phone and get a code and vote, and nobody touches it, and that vote is tallied somewhere, then we won't have all these problems anymore. But so long as there's somebody who's going to stay there to decide whether it's going to go in or not, that person can be compromised, and that will mean that we cannot have this. And then every time we will now say, okay, tinker with the system. We did a lot in the 2023 Act. We did everything. We made sure that we could use technology to get us to the point where we are. We never knew that somebody could tamper with the INEC system, as it were.
Okay, would we be looking at going fully electronic? Because to take out the human element will mean going completely electronic, both for voting and transmission of the results.
Precisely. That's exactly what I mean. Once it's completely electronic, there's no way again anyone can manipulate it. That's all.
Professor Dibe, do you agree in the age
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we do.
I just have a little to add to it.
Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Professor.
Professor Dibe.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to agree with Senator Baribe, but I will also add a different dimension. It's not just for me enough to talk about the human element or the law. In the social sciences, we have what we call the structure agency debate. If you want to bring transformation, what do you change? Where do you focus? Is it the structure, the environment, or the human agents? In our own, both are very important. It's like the chicken and egg argument. Which one do you focus on? So if you don't understand, first, why are elections anarchic? Why are contestations for power tending towards the Hobbesian state of nature? First, you will go into the environmental explanation. If you look at the presidential election, the stakes are too high. If you capture presidential power, everything is decided in your favor. You can use that power to privilege your in-group and, disadvantage the rivals to your in-group. That has been a very fundamental thing. So, and it's a winner takes all. So that's the environmental fact. If you don't change that environmental aspect of the structural constraints and focus on the human, and you can only preach to them, don't do this and don't do that. You can go and preach to somebody who is angry that others are cheating him not to cheat. So I think for me, that's why I've been recommending us, after as I have the opportunity, that we should move away. People have been questioning now, from Obasanjo to Fayemi, former governor of Ekiti State, to Atiku, whether the presidential system, the current liberal democracy as practiced, is what we need. You ask yourself, why do you need election? You need it for leadership recruitment. Do you think elections, as currently conducted, leads to people selecting the best? The answer is no. Do people believe that their votes count? No. So what is then what is the impact of the entire election? What it does is that it widens the social distance because various primordial identities are mobilized. So each time you organize this in every 4 years, you undermine the nation building process. So part of my suggestions are boom, that why don't we have a rotational presidential council along the lines of what we have in Switzerland, so that they take from one person from each geopolitical zone. They take 2 years. That gives you 12 years, and we take a break from politics. And the feeling, the anarchic nature, that if this man goes there, they will disadvantage me, probably will be attenuated. And if that structural element is taken care of, we can then come to the idea of the law to cement it. But if we focus on only one, and even if no matter what you do with the Electoral Act, people will be 2 steps ahead. And as Senator rightly pointed out, we went back, the election after the presidential election and the National Assembly, we went back to 1999 to 2007. Crude politics, crude godfatherism, ballot snatching, things that we left behind. And that shows you the primacy of politics.
So this form you've mentioned is a form of restructuring. Who would bear the cat? What you talk about, rotational...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It is difficult because every form of, if you want to reform a system, it often involves whittling down the power of the incumbent. If you look at the Ways report, one of the reasons it was not implemented was that the Attorney General said, look, we ask you to do this, and the recommendations all amount to reducing the power of the president. Do I see the current government embarking on any form of electoral reform? I don't. They've already said that INEC conducted the best election in the history of the country, which means there's no room for improvement. So I don't see them doing that, because anytime you embark on reform, you cannot go and say, okay, President Tinubu, now go and do a reform of rotational president, and somebody who is already planning for second term, for him to forgo. Politicians don't do that. Not just him, all politicians in Nigeria.
Senator Baribe, this matter of changing the environment even before the law, some will say, first of all, this Electoral Act was within the legislature. It was the National Assembly that passed this Electoral Act of 2022. You had the opportunity to take out the human element, but you and your colleagues did not do a good job of it. What's the guarantee that would happen? Tie that to what the professor has talked about, changing the environment, make public office inattractive, if I'm getting you right. Make public office unattractive, and then do rotational presidency.
Well, I don't know how you're going to do it. We were having the parliamentary system. It didn't work. Then we now are in the presidential system. It's still not working. So, Prof, I think what Prof needs is that you need to really change the human beings in Nigeria. There's no other way you can do any other thing, because it doesn't matter what system we use. Once people are overwhelmed by greed and the contestation for power, and are willing to do anything about it, and don't have the national ethos that will make them see that this is something you need to do in a right manner. I don't think that there's any way we can change it. The matter is not just that we didn't do a good job. We did a fantastic job, I tell you. But who knew that on the day of election, that INEC will fail everybody? Who knew? So what it tells me is simple. Can we remove this human element from anything called elections? Look, they do BB Nigeria, BB, what is it called now? Is it Big Brother Nigeria and all that? People vote and all that. There is no contest about the voting. How did they do it? People are doing all manners of other contests here, and they win things. How did they do it? There's no contest. It's just technology. And that's all that we need to deploy. And just remove the human being coming in between you and your ballot paper. That's all.
All right, well, that will be a good place for us to leave it there. I want to say thank you so much to Senator Aina Baribe, who joined us from Abia State, representing Abia South from the All Progressive Grand Alliance. Thank you so much, Senator Baribe.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
I'm Professor Jidofa Adibe, Professor of Political Science at Nasarawa State University. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.